So if you take this and run with it, this then goes into a kind of, I've broken down into more visual representation of, I think possibly a punchier representation, but not any more or less valid, but a punchier representation, which, correct me if I'm wrong, this is Mies, and it's from more recently, right?
Yeah, so this is a book, let's go way around. This is a book that all sort of...
Oh, wait a minute, let's go big face.
Transit boosters and
there it is.
All policymakers should read this. All policymakers in transport today should read this book. I mean, the awareness of it is staggeringly low, so my angle is all wrong. But
yeah, there it is. Transport for Suburbia, Beyond the Automobile Age by Paul Mies.
The great thing about, but you read this book, it'll change your mind about transport. Because one of the great things about it is that he basically argues that, the density myth is wrong.
Interesting.
So what you get in the sort of new urbanism and so on is this idea, if you increase the density, I know there's something in that, okay, but that'll support public transport and so on. But also he's also saying if you make the system good enough and accessible enough, then you can have a completely non-dense society, basically, that relies on public transport.
Interesting. So let's go through these 6 points, because I think they're very neatly connected here. Oh, Simon Kendall is saying excellent book. Simon, you're so on it.
Yeah.
Right, so these 6 points, and I'm going to go through each of the 6, and I'm not going to dwell on each of them because I think they refer back to some of the things we talked about. But these points, the first one is visibility. So it's visibility of the infrastructure, visibility of the system. The next one is simplicity. So I've got a little thing in the background there, but simplicity, the drumbeat of a clock face timetable as one example of simplicity. This is the fact that you don't have over complex. You've got a line and you've got trams. It's not every train doesn't go off to 20 different places. You have a simplicity of system. That's clear. Integration. So you have integration between lines and between different systems. This integration is critical to having a successful form of public transport infrastructure. The next one is affordability. I've got a nice picture of a ticket booth there on Metrolink. Affordability. The system has to be perceived as an acceptable level of cost. That does not necessarily mean free or super cheap, but it's got to be perceived as a justifiable expense to do the thing you want to do, which is generally go from A to B or from A to D or wherever it happens to be that you're going. You have to perceive it as an affordable choice. And the next one is, and catch me on any of these if you think there's a little more to it, Kev, but I think I'm covering it. The next one is safety, and I've put a picture of accessibility there with level boarding, but safety, it's also like being in a comfortable environment that feels safe. You perceive as being a safe environment to spend time in, stations that feel safe to be in.
You're not going to get mugged there.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, yeah. You feel safe, you feel secure. And then the last one, which I've got the big TFW sort of T on here, the last one is ownership. And this is an interesting, I want you to pick up on this a bit. So Mies suggests that not explicitly public ownership, but the perception that we all have a buy-in, an institutional buy-in to the system is critical in driving modal shift, right?
Yeah, so he's quite... So in the book, he actually looks at... He kind of taxonomizes different systems of ownership. And obviously, he's very against any sort of deregulated system. But ownership's important because it gives you kind of democratic or at least state control over it. But it's that sense of being able to bring together the different modes and different ways of traveling. That's also important. So all of these things are best achieved in some kind of, it doesn't have to be publicly owned necessarily, but some kind of public sector framework. So again, in Germany, quite often you'll have multiple local operators. So a different organization, municipal might own the trams, DB might own the trains, whatever, but there's an agreed fares structure. Usually there's what's called a tariff union. There's an agreed sort of fare structure. In the UK, we seem to be, part of the reason that this doesn't exist in the UK is probably that it would fall foul of competition and office authority laws. But that's the competition regulation might consider it to be, rather than integration, might consider it to be cooperation or. So it's
this is it again. Our idea of treating these things not as a service but as a business becomes a problem, and inherently, if you take away any one of these Jenga blocks, you're eroding the ability of the system to drive modal shift, right? You're eroding the desirability of people to use the system.
And if you're somewhere like Liverpool, it might be quite desirable to be able to afford to take the ferry for certain journeys on a travel card, as well as being able to take the underground or take the bus. So it kind of, so having that ability to move between them, but having a system where the institutional framework of all the modes fits together, doesn't have to be state-owned per se, but where it fits together is important. And this is one of the areas where, again, whenever Labour politicians pop up saying, "Oh, well, nationalise it all," it's like, okay, but what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, exactly. That's care. Like, okay, great, you've changed the name on a payslip. Yeah. What are you materially going to change as a result of that decision?
So I don't actually care that you're going to nationalise it, because we had nationalised systems before, but they basically spent 50 years trying to make a profit in the national framework. Yeah. So does it matter? So
yeah, exactly. If you're going to continue to drum them for that they have to create a profit, then nationalisation per se isn't. Sorry, I just whacked my microphone, everyone. Nationalisation per se isn't going to solve anything. You're going to have the same level of managed decline. So these 6 are fantastic, and I think we'll touch on this again. But when it comes to the kind of the thesis of the episode of why people prefer trams to buses, it's because buses, particularly if you've got a deregulated system with competing operators, you're losing the simplicity, you're losing the integration because the ticketing is not coherent. Affordability is a real challenge with buses in the UK, but also even if you have got all the other things, if you've got publicly owned buses, if you've got clean, safe, well-maintained, well-lit bus stops and buses, if they're affordable, if they are actually integrated, if you've got that simplicity, the challenge, you're still losing that Jenga block of visibility because you haven't got the fixed infrastructure, right? So that essentially, if you look at this as an equation, if you drop out or even kind of apply a reducing multiplier on any of these Jenga blocks or any of these variables, you're going to reduce the desirability of people to use that system. So you can apply this to all the different systems within our... it's from a different angle, but if you apply these to any of the things in our Not a Metro sorter, you can understand where some of these things drop away, and actually you gain some of the ridership and the modal shift capabilities of some of the more, if you like, heavy infrastructure systems.